All right, a very good morning once again, and many thanks for joining us and staying with us right here on Morning at NTV. I'm Romeo Busuk, and of course we are going to be talking about a very pertinent conversation, food systems in Uganda. Yes, and the 2021 Food Systems Summit that is going to be taking center stage in September of this very year. I do have the Food and Agricultural Country Representative, yes, and that is none other than Mr. Antonio Keridos. He joins us live right here on set. A very good morning, sir. He's not alone. Yes, we are also joined by Mr. Tejeza Joses. He is the Commissioner Strategic Coordination and also Implementation in the Office of the Prime Minister. Very good morning, gentlemen, once again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And indeed, let me start with you, Mr. Antonio Kerido. Let's start with what a food system is before we get into the 2021 Food Systems Summit.
Food system we define as a complex interaction of processes and people involved in the way we produce the food, the way we process our food, but also the way we consume the food. As we know, food is important to all aspects of our life. And we know that food is important in terms of cultural, social, economic dimension. It employs a number of people. But we know that whenever we talk about food, food brings us together as families, as communities, and it is important. As you know, in 2015, there was a commitment. The world made a commitment to achieve zero hunger by 2030. This was a bold commitment to all nations agreed on this particular commitment, and we have been monitoring the progress so far. And for the past several years, we realized that the number of hungry people in the world is increasing. This calls for a reflection from all nations to see what we can do to ensure that we achieve the target that we propose to ourselves, to have a world that is free of hunger. Our planet produces sufficient food for everyone, so it's not acceptable that we continue to have more than 800 million people going to bed without a single meal. So the challenge is upon all nations. And this food summit is an opportunity for us to reflect, but also come up with bold solutions from here, this year, 2020, to 2030, to ensure that we deliver on this promise. So what we as the United Nations, not as agencies, but particularly the nations, is an opportunity for us to come to the General Assembly and look at ways that we find global solutions for the food system, but a lot that we need to be doing is locally. Therefore, the importance of the national dialogues, the engagement of all the actors, because as I mentioned, it's from the farm to the fork. So you can imagine there is a complex interaction and a number of actors that are involved.
Indeed. And our smallholder farmers at the farm level, Mr. Keridos, are really struggling because 96% of the agricultural production here in Uganda is actually rain-fed. Climatic stability greatly determines the harvest cycle of one human being. So looking at that whole factor and how it determines the agricultural production value chain, don't you think it actually affects the food systems in Uganda?
Definitely. One of the aspects of our discussion and one of the action track of our dialogue is to see how we build resilience on the system. How we ensure that our food system is resilient to stress, resilient to to shocks, and resilient to vulnerability. Water is one aspect. Uganda is lucky because as a country, as I mentioned before, 20% of your land is covered by water. Here's the source of the Nile. We have abundant source of water, both on the surface but underground. So this is one particular vulnerability that we can solve by increasing, of course, the irrigation system, by ensuring that we're not so dependent on the rainfall and tap the resource that we have to ensure that the production system continue to move despite the challenge external or internal that comes to the system.
Mr. Tejiza, let's talk about the government efforts geared towards distributing irrigation schemes all over the country to ensure that our smallholder farmers do not pray for the mercy of rain every harvest cycle. And whenever that doesn't happen, you know what actually culminates into? Drought and then loss of the harvest in that regard. So what is government doing?
Yeah, thank you very much. Government is aware of all that you have said. And we have got what we call an irrigation master plan.
Indeed.
And an irrigation policy. And this came into effect by a cabinet definite resolution, set up a committee for water for production. And that committee is functional, and we are implementing the tenets of the policy and the tenets of the master plan. Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries and the Ministry of Water are key. But the Office of the Prime Minister is the coordinator. And those discussions have been taking place very many times relating to the subject you are alluding to. You know very well that about 39% of our economy are subsistence. And of that 39%, 56% are the smallholder farmers you're talking about.
Indeed.
So the issues, the shocks, the vulnerabilities of the small-scale farmers are at center stage. So it's a wide debate and a wide discussion, but in the realm of what you're asking about, that's the government effort. And there's an array of irrigation schemes in the National Development Plan 3. And we want to ensure that we build a model where all the irrigation schemes learn from each other. So the ones that are built, the ones that are functional, will be picking lessons, good practices, mistakes, successes, and moving together. So that effort is deliberate and is in place, shrined in the NDP3 and even institutionalized by way of a cabinet committee in the Office of the Prime Minister.
And 40% of our crop harvests are lost due to pests, diseases, and so forth. It seems like a lot is being lost when it comes to post-harvest handling and so forth. What are you doing in this regard to help our smallholder farmers?
With regard to post-handling, like His Excellency, Dr. Antonio has mentioned, these food systems, I can start from that, have the whole value chain system. Right from production, processing, storage, aggregation, distribution, and consumption. Now, when you come to the layer you're talking about, the post-handling, the post-harvest, most of the activities are resident under the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. They have a lot of content which they have developed by way of manuals, by way of policy. A manual is now in effect, and this manual is taking into consideration the parish development model, which has got enterprise selection across the country, different crops and different experiences in different regions. So what is happening is that the Ministry of Trade is customizing them to the different locations. And I want to tell you that what we do as government, and in this case specifically the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, has got consultations and participation by all stakeholders. We cherish that and we ensure that that is in. So that the whole cycle of planning, budgeting, implementation, monitoring, reporting has got all of us factored in so that we are together responsible, including you, the fourth estate, the state.
Indeed.
Yes, so what is being done in a nutshell, I can say, is that we have got manuals, we've got policy frameworks that are under Ministry of Trade, and they are consultative, and the sensitization is going on, and learning from each other continuously, as I say.
And of course, our smallholder farmers have been largely affected by this 42-day lockdown. Now, the other agricultural value chain, we do have distribution. From post-harvest handling, you do have distribution. They're stuck with their produce. They do not know how to take it to the market because we are not talking about big farmers, commercial farmers. We are talking about smallholder farmers who rarely have their own transportation to move from one district to another because they've been exempted. But they do not have their own transportation to ensure that if I'm in Masaka City and I want to sell my dairy produce in Kampala, I can't do that anymore. So they are stuck with their produce at their firms. What do you have as government to help them?
Thank you. We've been good enough or bad enough. The Zoom technology has come up, the Zoom-enabled technology. Yes. And even in this lockdown, we've been in consultations with farmers, and particularly in this dialogue, in these dialogues, for food systems, summit preparations. We have interfaced with them, and it's sad, but there is also, it's not hope lost. We're talking to a farmer in Tungamu via Zoom, and he said he had traveled 7 kilometers, 14 kilometers to his farm, because he was factoring in the going and coming back. And he said that he has so much food down there, it can't be transported, and a bunch of matoke was what he would sell to buy a sacket of salt. He would sell 2 bunches of matoke to buy a bar of soap. I'm just trying to emphasize the situation there, like you're talking about it. So we are aware of that reality. But on the other side, there were also gains, because he said the people who came from Kampala, we've had a bumper harvest. And you know, the prices are low because the harvest is in plenty.
Indeed.
So he said people here can now eat. And now I want to relate that to the way government of Uganda is handling COVID, the COVID response. It's health first, isn't it? And then we can have the economy and the convenience later. So the hope is that there is survival. That food is there, and the time to transport it will come. And you must be aware that there is a whole committee for transport enforcement. Enforced in the sense that, like His Excellency mentioned, you heard him mention that production must not be curtailed. Factory products, agricultural products. That's why you have food in Kampala. It's not grown here. So the prices are high. People here get higher food, but at the same time, down there, the prices are low and people can eat. So it's a balancing factor, but with a view to survive first.
Jose Stages, he is the Commissioner, Strategic Coordination and Implementation in the Office of the Prime Minister. Let's also bring in Antonio Caridos and talk about how the lockdown has affected our smallholder farmers. I'm sure FAO, Food Agriculture Organization, you've been undertaking some surveys on our smallholder farmers and agriculture as a whole in Uganda. How there is the situation as far as the COVID-19 lockdown is concerned on our smallholder farmers?
We know that COVID-19 has exposed a number of vulnerabilities that we have within our food production systems. And COVID-19 also is exposing inequalities, the link between inequality, poverty, food, and disease. And any measure that restricts the movement and access to market, we know that it will impact.
Indeed.
But good enough that, as Joseph has mentioned, this agriculture system is resilient. Farmers, they continue to work. The fact that the government recognized that agriculture is a strategic sector and allowed provisions to ensure that farmers continue to have access to their gardens and continue to produce, this has been a very good measure. But we know that because of the change in terms of consumption pattern, people are shopping differently. Access to market has become increasingly more difficult.
People holding on to their money, not wanting to spend it because of the uncertainties of the lockdown.
Definitely. Yes. So this creates some instability in the market. It creates some changes in prices that we have seen. But our farmers are quite resilient. They've been adjusting. And the good thing that we have sufficient food been produced in Uganda, not only for the internal market, but also for our regional neighbors. So you see that despite the challenge, the food system in Uganda is thriving and is thriving well. But we still recognize that we have more to do. How we put more investment on smallholders to ensure that they produce more efficiently. How we shift the way we produce to get better productivity of our land, meaning that in the same unit of land we can have more production. These are ways that we can continue to support the farmers, and of course all the technical support that Ministry of Agriculture continues to give to the local farmers is important for the know-how that they need to increase the productivity of the land.
You know, Ms. Antonio Caridos, the narrative has been that we do have sufficient food in this country, but then according to some reports that were authored by a Washington-based organization, that is HIFA International, around late last year, they indicated that even the smallholder farmers in this country are grappling and they are starving without anything to eat. They said 40% of the smallholder farmers within this country are also starving. Others had to scale down the number of meals they were eating in a day from 3 meals a day to maybe 1 meal a day, and others others would go even a day without having anything to eat for over 3 days. I mean, these are farmers who should be having food. And isn't this a callous development? And what comes to your mind when you hear such news?
This is the paradox that we need to address, because this is the land of plenty. But we know that we have pockets of food insecurity in Uganda, and we have pockets of malnourishment. We have also seen the UBOS data indicating that the stunting is still high. The anemia level is still also high, which means that although we have food, we're probably eating more of the same. It's not healthy, it's not balanced. So we need to do more. So this pockets of food insecurity is that we need to address, and this national dialogue, the discussions that we are continuing to have with all stakeholders, is to ensure that what are the solutions that we have to put in place to address this paradox that we see in the land of plenty. Is not acceptable that we have people food insecure or people going to bed without a meal.
Mr. Tejeza, why has it been so hard to achieve that desired transformation from subsistence all the way to commercialized agriculture? Why do we still have a very big chunk of our farmers still stuck in subsistence? Is it mindset change? Is it an issue to do with money, funding, and so forth?
There's an array of reasons and factors that you yourself see in your everyday life that we have to work on together for solutions.
Indeed.
And like Dr. Antonio has mentioned, that's one of the big purposes of these consultations and dialogues.
Indeed.
But you have to know that we still have a challenge of land evictions, land grabbing, and those are impacting on some of the few you are saying. Some may be spared that, but some may incur that. We also have urbanization competing with the food
population
basket.
Growth.
Exactly. So you'll find that somebody is complaining because somebody has built an estate in a land that would have otherwise been used for food production.
Indeed.
And you also know that these diseases do not spare even the small-scale farmers or the household farmers.
Indeed.
They do not spare them. We have got, for example, now the foot and mouth disease that was ravaging. We've got pesticides. We've got these disasters that have befallen us. We just saw what happened in Kasese. And when they are on the way, they don't look out for the big and small farmers.
Indeed.
The big farmers can manage to leverage their resources
from
and
Masaka City, from Kampala,
absolutely.
But then the smallholder farmers
they are also affected, but the other ones are affected more. So we are in it together, like I'm mentioning. And with regard to the diseases, again, after the Prime Minister has set up an animal health committee with wide composition. It's not going to look at foot and mouth, but we are saying, now let's look at all the diseases that may come, be it swine, be it chicken, and so on, as a way to now come together, private sector, government, and then all non-state actors and state actors, to ensure that we try to think together along that. And even with those other problems, when you go to the various ministries who are in lead, all the various programs and sectors in government, you find that there are efforts. So really, to answer your question, the reason why we have still stayed up there is not because we are static and not doing nothing, not because we are doing nothing, but there are these vagaries of nature. There are these issues that you see that day to day that affect you and me. Diseases of the cows, even the crops themselves, the high prices of, say, insecticides and medicines that affect the smaller ones more than the bigger ones who have bigger capital, and so on. So basically, that is the reason, and those are the drivers of that. So the other one is just probably, you can call it a symptom, or those are the symptoms, whichever way you call it. But we address both to realize the results. And when you go to our NDP3, you see that all that you are mentioning are actually result areas. When we say result areas, it means we are targeting them to achieve results, to move from where we are to a better place. Of course, taking into consideration the feasibility and the acceptability of the interventions that were put in place.
When you hear reports indicating that some of our smallholder farmers are going to bed hungry, maybe scaling down the number of meals they were having in a day from 3 to 1, and others going as long as 3 days without having a meal, what comes to your mind? In a state where we are saying that it is food sufficient and farmers are having food in this lockdown and we are not targeting them with any relief.
Yes.
But then we hear reports that they are going to bed without anything to eat for a couple of days. What comes to your mind?
Yeah, what comes to mind is to develop strategies to address that. And we are doing that because that's worldwide. It's not only here that's happening. In every country, in every location, there will be some who will go to bed without food and some who will go to bed with food. They are vulnerable populations. And what we have done as government, of course, the question of what comes to my mind is a very simplistic one. What comes to my mind is sadness. I feel sympathy and sadness. I would answer it that way, but I just want to go ahead and let you know that after that sympathetic feel, all that togetherness of government, we have still gone ahead to take to make remedial efforts, like His Excellency mentioned. SDG 2 is about zero hunger, Sustainable Development Goal 2. And government of Uganda, spearheaded by the National Planning Authority, has done a whole zero hunger strategy to address it. And you'll find many strategies, broad ones. And when I say broad ones, it means they provide space for smaller institutions, even yourself here in the media, to say, what can you fit in to contribute to the government efforts? We have got the Uganda National Action Plan 2, Nutrition Action Plan 2. We're in Plan 1, now we're in Plan 2. And when you go to that, again, there are strategies. We are looking at the stunting, because you and me and everyone knows that. That's an indicator of chronic malnutrition or undernutrition. We are looking at anemia. We are looking at what are the main ones, but those are the things that we look at as indicators. Breastfeeding. Breastfeeding, we're also looking at that to avoid those vulnerable populations. I'm just talking about the vulnerabilities. And when we look at that, we have set targets. They are targets by the UN, global targets, but we also have our own targets. And the beauty is that our target, we are moving towards our targets. Probably the reduction in anemia proportions and the reduction in starting proportions is not moving at par with our expectation of the goals of the UN Sustainable Development Goal. But the reductions are there. When you go to the household budget survey done by UBOS, you see impressive improvements. And when you go to the UDHS of 2016 and you compare the base and where we are, you see that the deliberate efforts have yielded some fruit. We are not there, you will see that, but if you look at the statistics, we are moving towards the there you want.
Indeed, and this population is going to increase from 44 million to all the way to 100 million by 2050. Do we have the capacity to actually feed that whole population by 2050, given the factors that we are dealing with right now, COVID-19 and the inability of our smallholder farmers to actually access maybe agrochemicals or even to access the markets because of the inter-district travel burn?
You know, when you talk about 2050 and when you talk about 2025, you are talking about different things because this is the whole landscape. And the government is aware of that. That's why you see we have Vision 2040. We have a vision. You cannot wake up today and do actions. You do broad actions for Vision 2040. But we do the sequencing, the timing, and say that our projection is this. If we get here with the resources we have, we'll be there the next time. So in the NDP, I mean in the Vision 2040, we are going to have 6 plans, national medium term, 5 years. And we are now in the 3rd one. And you can see that we are making improvements even in structuring. NDP 1, NDP 2, we didn't have the programmatic approach. Now we have said, why don't we do the programmatic approach so that we shoot in one goal? And mind you, National Planning Authority has also got 10 of that. They also have 3 10-year plans. So they are horizons. So we look at the big horizon, like you are saying, and similarly to what you are saying, we also look at that. And then we look at 10, and we look at 5. So if you are going to put actors in context, you had better look at what they have to do tomorrow, next year. But if you say in 2050, most likely, not even most likely, automatically will not be there working. There will be another team.
We are looking at the factors right now and whether or not they'll affect your ability to feed 100 million people by 2050. The factors like COVID-19 that have made farming a hell for the smallholder farmers in our country. The factors like the integrated lockdown that has made it very, very hard for them to move from one place to another. If you put that together and the fact that we do not know when this COVID-19 pandemic is going to go away, that's why we are saying, don't you think these factors might affect your ability to put in place measures that are geared towards ensuring that this country is a food basket that is going to feed 100 million people by 2050? don't you think there is a problem right now that might affect your ability?
That's obvious. Automatically, there's a problem. Even everybody's home and every state knows that there's a problem.
Indeed.
And we do adoption measures. Already, the National Planning Authority is trying to reprioritize. You've seen that?
Indeed.
So we adapt. We adapt to the situation
They're saying
that
there's
comes.
no third wave. Indeed.
Even if it comes, we'll adapt. The important thing is working within the resources
Indeed.
and being strategic to work together. And we cannot be rigid within a changing environment.
Indeed.
Yes, we assess the environment and build strategies within a context. So when you say that it will affect or hamper our plans, that is automatic and obvious. It's a big yes. But the point is that we shall adapt together and make remedial measures.
Yes.
Indeed, Commission on Strategic Coordination and Implementation in the OPM. Let's also bring in the FAO representative, country representative to Uganda, that is Antonio Keridos. Let's talk about how COVID-19 has affected the efforts that are geared towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. How has COVID-19 affected all those efforts?
Indeed, what we have seen that due to COVID-19, we have an increase in more than 161 million additional people going hungry in the world because of the COVID-19. As I mentioned, this has exposed the linkage between poverty and food and the disease itself. Globally, what we have seen throughout all regions is that there is an increase in the number of hungry people. And in our continent, about 287 million people going hungry. Out of this number, half is in our sub-region, in the Horn of Africa.
Yes.
In the Horn of Africa. So we have the challenge, but we should look at as opportunities, because we do still have sufficient arable land.
40 million acres of arable land.
And we have sufficient water. What we need to do is then how we increase the efficiency of production. We know that in a number of our crops, you mentioned a while ago, losses in terms of
40%.
40%. But we still know that we are not efficient. What we're getting out of 1 hectare of land is still low compared with other regions. So we need to improve the production efficiency. We see the difference between what Naro is getting on the research station, and what our farmers are getting. So there is a yield gap for us to improve, and this will give us a sufficient leverage in terms of food to feed everyone. Of course, we have to address the aspects related to distribution. We know that some regions have plenty, others has less. So we need to have a strategy when it comes to food distribution to ensure that we provide food to everyone.
Like if a matoke is 500 shillings in Western Uganda and it's still 6,000 in Kampala, go to Western Uganda, get that matoke transported and distributed to the people in Kampala, where food is expensive.
That's the interlinkage that we have to explore and address, because food system is complex enough, a number of actors. So we need to also not only focus on increasing production, but see how this food is distributed to those that are more in need. Uganda also needs to reflect and put in place a strategy for food security. In a number of nations we have seen they have a strategic reserve in case of any external shock to the system. There is ways of reacting to ensure that you have a social program in place that responds to this type of stress when it comes to food distribution. But COVID-19 is here. We believe that we can suppress it. And food is important because we know to deal with COVID-19, you need to be well nourished. So food is a central part of this fight against COVID. And the more resilient is our production system, the better. We need to do more also to educate our people to eat healthy and to eat a balanced meal. We know that cost and inequalities has also pushed a number of people away of a healthy diet. But this is an effort that collectively we have to look at it. I believe that the school feeding program, a comprehensive school feeding program, is also important. We know the number of kids that are stunted in school. We need a comprehensive school feeding program to help address. And if we link the school
So
feeding
we
program,
need to be offering variables to our students, not only posho and beans.
Yes.
And this is what is causing the stunted growth.
Yes,
the fact that
definitely.
they are not changing the meals.
Yes.
All right.
And if we link the school feeding program to smallholders,
Yes.
ensure that whatever food that we give to our kids in school are procured from smallholders.
Indeed.
Definitely, we create a dynamic in the market that really can really boost the smallholder farmers.
And of course, in the absence of that market, you know how hard they are being hit, the smallholder farmers, and how they are grappling with that market. Now that the students are at home, they cannot sell that milk, they cannot sell that posho, that matoke, they are grappling.
And we have 10 million kids in school.
Indeed.
If we have to feed 10 million kids every day, imagine
15 million.
Imagine the impact that we have on smallholder. This is what we have seen in all developed nations. In the United States, throughout Europe, they all have comprehensive feeding program. They are tied this program to the smallholders. All the food that is fed in school are procured from the local farmers.
Indeed.
And they define who is the local farmer, and they give the local farmers a fair share throughout the year, and it works perfectly. It's another way of subsidizing the farmers.
Amazing.
But for a good cause, because you ensure that every kid in school have a healthy meal. Another dimension of this is the food safety. This is something that is critical, and then we're discussing on the national dialogue. How do we ensure that we have the quality controls in place? That you and I in Kampala, when we go to any market here, we purchase our food, we ensure that this food is safe. It's without agrochemicals, without the toxic that can cause non-communicable diseases. So these are aspects in our discussion that we need to continue to discuss, because we want this summit to be a solution summit, and for us to also monitor from here 2021 to 2030 what are we doing in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, to ensure that all of us have sufficient food, but also to ensure we continue to develop
A solutions summit. And of course, after we come back from this short break, you'll be acquainting the smallholder farmer who is watching Morning at NTV with the requisite information as to why they should be clamoring to actually engage themselves with this 2021 Food Summit in September. Yes. All right. We shall be right back with this conversation. You're still watching Morning at NTV. I have Antonio Queridos and also Mr. Tejes Joseph with me right here in studio. We'll be right back. July. That was supposed to, we were supposed to be having another pre-dialogue on Friday tomorrow, but it was postponed. So the government officials, FAO itself and other stakeholders will be making their way to Rome on the 26th of July for that first pre-food summit dialogue. Now let's continue with this conversation to talk about why it is significant for the smallholder farmers to engage themselves with such dialogues, to actually listen in and actually get more information from the United Nations Food Systems Summit. A very good morning once again, Antonio Queridos. As a smallholder farmer who is watching Morning at NTV, why should they clamor for the United Nations Food Systems Summit in September?
Well, what we have to say to small farmers is that this summit is People's Summit. The theme of this summit is leaving no one behind. And it's been designed in a way that we ensure that we have the voices of the smallholders and the voice of the farmers, for us to come up with a solution that really target the challenge that we know they've been facing while producing the food that we eat. We have organized this discussion around 5 tracks or 5 important themes. The first one has to do with access to safe and nutritious food for all. This is important, and all the solution around this action track has to do how we produce more food, how we ensure that the people have safe and nutritious food, but also how we invest on food safety.
Yes.
The second action track is about the shift into consumption pattern.
Sustainable consumption.
Sustainable consumption. To ensure that we don't go clearing our land without exploring all the potential on what how can we produce more with less? It is important. looking
But how can we produce more with less? But we have 40 million acres of arable land. We're only tilling around 20 million acres.
We need to invest more on mechanization.
Yes.
We need to invest more in improving the soil fertility.
Yes.
We need to do more when it comes to irrigation system. We need to do more when it comes to pest and disease control.
Indeed.
To ensure that we have a system that is efficient, that produce more with less. So this is also important, that all the discussion, the solution around this action track is how we put in place the solutions to address this challenge that I mentioned. The third one has to do with the environment.
Boost nature positive production.
Because we know that agriculture sector contributes to 30% of global gas greenhouse emissions. So it is a sector also contributing to the loss of 80% of the biodiversity in the world. So we are aware of this, that producing food have negative impact of environment.
Especially food waste.
Yes, and the food waste and all the other implications that we know in terms of production system. How we produce in a way that we preserve the natural resource for our new generation. I told you that the food system is a complex, a number of actors. Livelihood discussion is important.
Indeed.
We want to look at the sustainable livelihood of all the actors within this chain.
Action track number 4.
From the farmers, from the transporters, for those on the manufacturers processing the food, for those serving the food, for those selling the food. All of these actors are actors within the food system chain, that their livelihood is important. Then we have to work in terms of decent work for all of them. But what the technologies that we put in place to ensure that their livelihood is sustained over time. And the last one is about the resilience. How
to vulnerabilities and shocks.
Yes,
and
how we address all the vulnerabilities. We
climate change.
Climate change is one. Climate change can be a driver, but it can be also a consequence of our action. But climate change...
Clearing land for agriculture, deforestation. Yes.
How we put in place adaptation measures, but also at the same time what we do to ensure that we preserve the planet for our kids. So the resilience dimension of food system is important, because we have seen that the shocks that can come from anywhere. We have the locust, we have now COVID-19, we had in the past army worm. There are a number of stress. Agriculture is a risky business, let's say.
Indeed.
So we need to put in place systems that help the smallholders to become more resilient. And the discussions and the solutions that is coming out under the leadership of OPM, but the co-leadership of NPA and MAIF, and all the other partners are on these dialogues, is to ensure that we come up with the solutions that are actionable, but also help address the challenge that the smallholders are facing. For them, one important advice, the more organized they are, the better. Cooperatives, farmers organization, for farmers to be part, not only just producing and sell at the farm gate, but to be part of the next step of the node, where they can continue to make income. When you produce and you sell at the farm gate, that stays there. Another opportunity that I see for smallholders is how they can be part of this value chain in the program, the ambitious program of the government of Uganda when it comes to agroindustrialization, create an opportunity for smallholders to be part of the next node of the chain, so they can get more out of the effort they put on the
Great insights by the Food and Agricultural Organization Country Representative Antonio Queridos, meaning even though Ugandans were able to exhaust all the 40 million arable land in this country, as long as they are engaged in subsistence agriculture, there will be low yield. But even if they were to use only 20 million acres of that arable land, but in commercialized agriculture, there will be higher yield. So how you use your land is really imperative. Thank you very much, Antonio Keridos. Let's also bring in Tegeza. Tegeza Joseph, he is the Commissioner at Strategic Coordination and also Implementation in the Office of the Prime Minister. Mr. Tegeza, let's talk about how this country, Uganda, is preparing for the Global 2021 Food Systems Summit.
Yeah, thank you very much. Uganda is preparing this Global Food Systems Summit with participation of the United Nations. I should mention that we have a very good structured working relationship with the United Nations. About a year ago, or a few months ago, we are dealing with the United Nations through the United Nations Development Assistance Framework. And we are now dealing with them through the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. The word assistance and cooperation are very important words to us in government and the UN partners. Assistance, helping, coming in to assist somebody who is probably helpless. Indeed. Cooperation, working together for common benefits, for common purposes. Indeed. So now that is our aspiration. I think I should make that squarely. I put that squarely on the table. We developed the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework together with the United Nations from the time of the table of contents, when the UN passed that on to the partner states, Office of the Prime Minister, co-chaired with UN Resident Coordinator's Office, and we came to that. So we are together on that, but importantly in the Food Systems Summit, I should also mention that we ensured that we had alignment with the National Development Plan 3 and the Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for the UN. It has strategic priorities which look at governance, which look at well-being of the population. Indeed. And we also have the same in Uganda. When you look at our strategic objectives, they actually go for that as well. And they have got the 4 Ps, like he's mentioning, the profits. I mean, we look at the people, and we look at the planet. We all look at that for the future. So I just wanted to say that, and also thank the UN family in that we are in it together. So the beginning point is that the United Nations Secretary General called for a UN summit for all member states globally, and Uganda is a member state. So we kicked into gear and said and agreed with the UN that government of Uganda will lead the efforts. And Office of the Prime Minister is the convener. The convener simply means somebody who organizes the programs, the activities, and how other players will come in. Then the co-convener is the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries, and the National Planning Authority. The chairperson, National Planning Authority, and her team, the ED, plus other technical staff, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture and his team, they have been with us at the front of the preparations for these summits. But now, around us are what we are calling the anchoring agencies. And those are UN agencies. Indeed. So globally, like His Excellency has mentioned, this summit is structured around 5 tracks. But for purposes of simplicity, let's just call them themes. The first one, which is not only ours, but globally. The first one is what he has talked about, the access to nutritious
food for all.
For all. And in Uganda, the way we have arranged that is that the Honorable Minister for Agriculture is chairperson of that track. And that means that his PS now is in charge of the technical staff in agriculture and its associated agencies in the country, in the government, that fight towards that. And besides that, we have involved the civil society and international NGOs. Indeed. And the Food Rights Alliance is the one for that action track. Indeed. And that means that the co-chair becomes that one together with Minister of Agriculture. So that's how that first track is structured.
All right, but how are you helping in this lockdown?
We are going down up to the 5 tracks. Yes, they each have a UN agency. I may not go through all of them, but that's the structure. Indeed. Each has the minister beginning health, water, gender, local government.
Value addition is a conversation we haven't had during this food systems conversation, and I believe it's really important. How we as a government helping our smallholder farmers achieve value addition during this lockdown. I might be a dairy farmer in Mbarara somewhere, but I can't sell my milk in Kampala. I could be having a tray of eggs in my area that was going for maybe 10,000. It is now 6,000. And I could, because they're perishable, I could be throwing them away. So value addition, how can we acquaint them with the information that they need to create value addition during this lockdown? I'm stuck with the eggs. What can I do? Can't I make egg powder? It can go for 12 months, not only 2 months. So let's talk about that. Value addition for our farmers.
Let me just say two things about value addition. Everybody, even before lockdown, value addition has been a talk. And the second thing I want to say is that we are having African Union, even beyond the country, we are having African Union discussion. As Africa, the African countries are going to the Global Summit with one position. And the Honorable Minister for Agriculture was at another summit, pre-summit for African Union, whereby we agreed on some areas. And they also allowed us that as we consult the different stakeholders, we shall, by the Global Summit, give our position as Uganda to factor in the African Union position. I want to say that about value addition. It came out, it's a big thing that came out. So we'll have that. But back to your question, lockdown and value addition. I talked earlier about survival. I don't think that if you had a factory yourself that is producing milk and you are busy balancing the workers and making the business survive, this would be a time now for new innovations in this period.
Indeed.
So it's the lockdown is a time of, like His Excellency says, let's keep quiet, see where trends go. It's really not so much innovations, because not because we don't want them, but it's more about survival. So the value addition discussion is beyond the lockdown. Some few entities may say, well, for us we are comfortable, we can still discuss innovations. But globally, most are just striving to survive. How they keep in production.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Tejeza K. Joseph. And before I let you go, Mr. Antonio Queridos, what happens when our food systems fail? Let's talk about that before I let you go.
We don't want to think about this scenario of failure of
We have challenges with our health, education, security, human rights, peace, and
because
all together.
You know that as a human being, one thing that we cannot prescind is food.
Indeed.
For our survival. So we really don't want to think of a world or any nation where we have a failed food system.
Indeed.
Therefore, this discussion and this push to see what we can do better to ensure that we address hunger in the world.
All right.
Because we have sufficient food. Even as we speak, the planet is producing sufficient food to everyone. So let's put our minds together. And this moment in September, and also the press summit, is an opportunity for us to see how we define the scope of our ambitions, but also define how we're going to work
to improve the food
systems
systems
and ensure that we have sufficient food.
Antonio Queridos, thank you very much. He is the Food and Agriculture Organization country representative to Uganda, and also Tejeza K. Joseph. He is the Commissioner Strategic Coordination and Implementation in the Office of the Prime Minister. Gentlemen, thank you very much for having made the time to speak to us about this very pertinent conversation. Now that we are grappling with this 42-day lockdown, smallholder farmers couldn't be more appreciative of such information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And of course, let's fast forward, go to Stephen Imbide, my reporter. Very good morning, sir. He is talking to some of the traders within Kampala, the CBD, to talk about the plight that they've been going through during this COVID-19 lockdown.